This is the Baunfire Gaming Podcast, episode 340. I'm your host, Morgan, aka Bon Diesel, and this week we'll be talking about Summer Game Fest, PlayStation, and Xbox showcases with my news and reactions and all of that, the Nintendo Switch 2 release, the Mass Effect show lives, and much more. It's been a crazy week. I'm recording the show late so I can talk about all of the showcases and all the news. And I have some stuff going on this week that's going to make it hard for me to be around. So you're getting this episode a bit later than normal, but it should be pretty chock full of information. And not just the showcases or Switch 2. There was some other neat stuff that happened this week as well. So don't be surprised if I kind of do a shallow take on most things as we get through this. It's an exciting time of year, right? We're finding out what's coming out for the rest of the year. We're finding out what's coming out next year or even beyond that. We're even getting a little bit of hardware news and rumors and all of that. So it's a good time. So I'm trying to just take it all in and kind of enjoy where we're at and what we're getting. And I'm just excited. So while I tend to ramble on in this section a bit more, I want to get into it. So let's move on. Okay, so as a true Xbot, I have to start with the Xbox showcase. We had a ton of stuff here. Not like a 10 out of 10 show. I don't think that's possible for any of them. And I don't even think this is quite as like revolutionary and crazy as 2024. But it was really, really good. For me, it showed me some stuff, some new stuff I'm interested in. It changed my mind about a couple games that I was not really interested in, honestly, and I now am. And it kind of reaffirmed interest I had in some other games. So they kicked it off with the ROG Xbox Ally and Ally X. So this is essentially the Ally 2 from Asus. It has a lot of the same specs and stuff. The hardware is like interesting. It's a new CPU from AMD, like a really powerful mobile CPU. But the really interesting thing is that they are running this pared down version of Windows 11. This has been something people have wanted for a long time. It's essentially what the Xbox runs now. I'm not. It isn't the Xbox UI exactly. It's not the Xbox operating system. Because we already know that actually console only games will not run on this. It's going to run PC versions of games. But between updates to the PC Xbox app, as well as things that they've done to try to, basically pare back how heavy the Microsoft, the Windows system can be on these other handhelds that we've been seeing. It seems like, and from the reviewers I've seen who have gotten previews of this and hands-on time, it really legitimately is amazing. Like it's legitimately really, really good. And the reason is because they're cutting out everything. Like it doesn't even boot into Windows. It boots into this Xbox game UI. Now I am under the impression it can still run Steam and it can still, hit up these other stores. But, obviously the primary thing these ones are going to go for is the Xbox PC app running, games, that you download through that app. It's going to be expensive. Like, I've already seen people trying to be like, oh, the Switch 2 is still better because it's going to be cheaper. Yeah. Like this is probably going to be twice the price of a Switch 2. It's going to be $600 to $1,000. Like, and that's kind of been, the pattern. Even with the Steam Deck, like it came out so long ago, and if you look at its internals, it's decently priced, and I think like the $400 to $600 range. But it's pretty outdated at this point. And when you look at the other, I think the Ally X that came out, the Ally 1, it's it's has a different CPU, but it has like similar RAM. It has 24 gigs of RAM, which is insane for a handheld. Even for a laptop, that would be a lot. Even for a desktop, it's plenty. I have more than that, but that's just because that's one of the things I emphasized when I built my rig. But at the end of the day, this just it's really cool, man. Like it's cool to see this. We know that the Xbox like branded handheld is kind of on hold right now because they want to make this UI better, make a Windows version for handhelds that would be better suited for a actual first party piece of hardware. What's interesting is that those rumors made it seem like they were like completely shelving this Xbox handheld and that it was to work on Windows. I mean, from even what we've seen so far, this is very much a kind of Steam UI version of Windows already. And from the previews I've seen, the developers are already saying like, that they aren't done cutting things yet. The idea is to really get this version of Windows down to the bare minimum it needs to be able to run the games and stuff like that people actually want this device for. Maybe there's going to be ways to try to use it as an actual PC. I'm sure there is a tiny, minuscule number of people who want that as well from this, but I have to imagine that's going to be a very small minority. So them focusing on the people who just want this device for games, I think that's really smart. And like right now, I think the version that the current hardware or software that's on it is using 2 gigs less of RAM than the typical Windows build. Like that's a lot. Even if you have 24 gigs, if 6 or 7 gigs of RAM are going to running the operating system in the background, that's a big deal. If you can get that down to 1, 2, 3 gigs of RAM being used, and then you have 20 plus free for the game, that's great. So cool announcement. Good to see some hardware. I suspect next year we'll be seeing some desktop hardware, but we'll have to wait and see. We finally got the Final Fantasy 16 announcement, which it was the same day. It was essentially a shadow drop, as well as Remake Integrate is finally coming to Xbox. It's coming in winter of 2025. I have to imagine that Rebirth will follow as soon as it contractually can. I have to imagine they have a good 5-year exclusivity deal or something, kind of probably like what they did with Death Stranding, where that did eventually come to freaking Game Pass of all things on Xbox when it hit. But I believe it was after, I'm pretty sure, a 5-year, maybe 3, but after a pretty lengthy exclusivity window. It wouldn't surprise me at all. But we have Final Fantasy games, and something I actually saw, I think it was Noble on social media, pointed out that Xbox now has more Final Fantasy games on it than PlayStation does, which is pretty strange if you know the relationship there. We got a Grounded 2 announcement from Obsidian. I wasn't a huge fan of the first game, and I'm not really super interested in this. It looks pretty iterative, but it's Obsidian. It's going to be their third game they released this year, because they had Avowed already, which was great. They have Outer Worlds 2, which looks really, really good, as well as now Grounded 2. It started off as a small team. We now know they're getting help. I believe it was it Square Enix or no, it wasn't. No, it's not Square Enix. It's I can't remember. You can tell me in the comments. I'll remember as soon as I end the show. But they are getting outside development help, which makes sense and is kind of cool. That means that the original Grounded must have been a big enough deal for them to feel like it's necessary to invest a lot more into it. So if you're a Grounded fan, you have that. Outer Worlds 2, they did like a little snippet at the beginning, then a more extended showcase at the end. I actually ignored most of it. I did see a little bit and it looked great, but I don't really want more info about Outer Worlds 2. I know I want it. I know I'm going to play it. At this point, I don't want to be spoiled of anything. So I mostly ignored that. The one thing that did slip through to me is apparently this is going to be Xbox's first $80 game. I mean, it's been coming ever since Switch 2 was announced and some of those game prices were announced. PlayStation's going to follow suit. Don't think they won't. This is just going to be another push from Xbox to try to get people on Game Pass. Because you're talking about 3 or 4 months of Game Pass that you could have instead. And, you could buy 2 months of Game Pass, probably play through the entirety of Outer Worlds 2, and then play 5 other games if you wanted to. So I don't like games getting that expensive. I think it's insane. I'm kind of surprised hasn't happened earlier, and it's happening now, whether we like it or not. So buckle up. Clockwork Revolution was an interesting one for me. I had no interest in this game. I'm not really into steampunk stuff. It had BioShock vibes, which like I like BioShock, but I'm not super into it. And this trailer, this presentation changed my mind. I'm super excited for it. So it seems like it is still kind of like a Fallout slash BioShock kind of theme, but they went really, or at least decently in depth with a bunch of time mechanics and how things you do or whatever will impact the world. You can do a bunch of stuff with you and the antagonist in the game can control time, can go back in time, can do all kinds of stuff. Just a really really good trailer, and I think this is what this game needed to kind of get people on board. In Exile is a very, very consistent studio. I think with the right kind of games in order, they could definitely become kind of an Obsidian type studio for them. I mean, their most recent games were like the Wastelanders or whatever, kind of CRPG type of games. So I'm really curious that they're doing something very different. But what they've shown so far looks incredible. Planet of Lana 2, Children of Leaf, or of the Leaf, I think, as well as Resonance, A Plague Tale Legacy, were both revealed for 2026, both on Game Pass. The first Planet of Lana, it's not the most complicated game in the world. It's I think maybe 8, 9, 10 hour game. It is one of the most visually striking games I've ever played, has one of the best soundtracks I've ever heard, and had a really, really, really cool story, especially towards the end. It's like, as you play through the game and you see what's happened to the world, and then when you learn what the reason it's happening, it's really, really cool. And that makes me super excited for the sequel because I wanted more info. I wanted more information about what happened. Obviously, I don't want to talk about spoilers, but just really just a beautiful game. If you ever look on my YouTube channel, it's just Bon Diesel, look up Planet of Lana on there. And I have it's a few minute segment that is just one of the most beautiful moments I've ever experienced in a video game. And it was like one of two or three that I would put on a list of, if you had to give me a top maybe 15 list, two or three moments from Planet of Lana would be on that for like moving moments in a video game. And I'm a pretty big story guy when it comes to games. This is something I really do care about. And for one game to take up that much space is, in my opinion, a big compliment. And so it just makes me so excited for the second one. The Plague Tale game is interesting. So I still don't know. Maybe I should do some more reading, but it is either a prequel or a sequel to Requiem, focused on Sophia, which is one of the characters, one of the NPCs you meet throughout the Requiem, the second game. And it seems like it's tying her into the story. My assumption is it's a sequel to Requiem, but it's definitely more of like a spin-off game. They aren't even advertising it or showing it as like the third Plague Tale game. That seems either, spoilers, at the end of Requiem, it suggests the next game could potentially take place in modern day, which would be really interesting. Or they may just do a story that continues on from the second game. We would, I'm curious to how they play with that. And then they wrapped up the show with Call of Duty Black Ops 7 with this really kind of strange sci-fi kind of trailer they showed. And it was so funny. I saw so much reaction of people being like, I can't believe they ended the show with Call of Duty. It's like, well, one, they didn't. They had the showcase after. And two, like, I can't believe they ended the showcase with their biggest money making game. Like, of course they they aren't going to ignore it completely. People are mad, and we can get more into the conversation that they didn't show anything from Halo or E-Day, Gears of War E-Day, or, all these games. Next year's the 25th anniversary of Xbox. They're going to show that stuff then. Like, I'm sorry. I'm sure everyone wishes we would have seen that stuff this year. But one, we saw a bunch of really cool stuff. I haven't even listed half of it yet. And like Xbox has such a big library now, they can do this. So we'll get into that conversation. For the other games they showed that I'm not particularly interested in, but some of them caught my eye. Persona 4 remake, it's a big deal. Invincible versus fighting game, not my thing at all, but it looked pretty cool. There are no ghosts at the Grand. It's just really interesting, like renovation game by day, stealing and slash mystery game by night. Seems very curious, and it has a talking cat. They did mention Hollow Knight Silk Song, that I believe it's supposed to be coming with the handhelds that they talked about. So it's coming 2025, whether people believe it or not. Chronos: The New Dawn was kind of interesting. It had very much a kind of like a Dead Space, Resident Evil, Silent Hill kind of feel to it. So interesting game there. Beat of Reincarnation, I think was it, is a Game Freak game. If you don't know who Game Freak is, they're the ones who makes all of Nintendo's Pokemon games. I looked into it. I didn't realize that every 3 or 4 years they make like another game other than Pokemon. And it was so funny. The reaction to it was so funny as well, because everyone was like, wait, they can make a pretty game? Because this game looked gorgeous. It looked very pretty. Not really my style, I don't think, but I'm curious. But just the fact that Game Freak is making a game on Xbox is just insane to me. But it's 2025, everything goes. Indiana Jones DLC, a game I didn't vibe with, but a lot of people did. And I think DLC for it is even better. Ninja Gaiden 4, we've already seen this. It looked like Ninja Gaiden. I suck at those games. I'm sure I'll try it out and we'll give up pretty quickly, but I'm happy it exists. Super Meat Boy 3D, again, not really my thing, but still cool it's happening. High on Life 2, the most divisive game I can think of in recent history, where either you absolutely adored the first game or you couldn't stand it. I was kind of in the latter group, but still, I'm happy that that's still happening. This Aphelion it is very kind of Tomb Raider, like the kind of rebooted Tomb Raider. Had tons of those vibes, and it looks like it's going to be like Hold Me As I Cry type of game at the end. But then the trailer, like, it had all these vibes of this woman trying to find this man and all these trials and tribulations she's going to go through. And then at the end, it showed the man, and it kind of gave it like it hinted that maybe more of like a horror game or something like that. So definitely curious to how that game plays out. Very excited for it. And then Mudang Two Hearts, very interesting sci-fi kind of Kojima looking game. And all I can think about is how I'm pretty sure that Mudang was the name of that pygmy uh hippopotamus that everyone was obsessed with for like a month. And I just can't not imagine that thing is going to be in the game. I doubt it will be. The game actually looks really interesting and neat, but all I can think about is a little soft hippo. But anyways, I thought the show was great. I would give it like a solid, maybe like 8 out of 10 is kind of where I sat with it. It was really strange. I saw like kind of funny. They were like so down on it. It just, sometimes it just feels like Xbox isn't allowed to have enough wins, like isn't allowed to have multiple wins in a row. Like they've had this insane, you know, uh, cadence of games coming out over the last, honestly, I would argue the last like 3 years of just these really great games. Like I think I've played so many games through Game Pass and loved so many of them. If I think about how much money I would have spent on the games that I loved through Game Pass, I don't know how long it's gonna take me to like not make my money back. I just, like, this showcase is weird because, and they mentioned during it that next year's 25th anniversary, talked about how, they'll have news for Halo, for Gears. Phil Spencer mentioned the next Forza game, so I assume the next Horizon game comes next year. Like, we know those things are going to come. We know they just aren't ready. Like last year, they finally announced the new Halo, that it was going to be on Unreal Engine and stuff. That game won't be ready to show this year. Like, and what's annoying is the same people who are like throwing a fit that they didn't have enough first party, which they did. They had plenty of first party. They just don't have enough time to show every first party. But if they showed every first party they have or they're working on every year without significant updates, these same people would complain that they just keep showing us the same stuff over and over again. I wanted to see State of Decay 3. I wanted to see Fable or Contraband or all these games, Perfect Dark. But they either aren't ready, or this just wasn't their moment. They have so many games now. They probably can't just lean on the summer showcase and the dev direct they do at the beginning of every year. They're probably going to start having like one-off shows. Like they're probably going to have a one-off show for Call of Duty in a couple months. They're probably going to have a one-off show, probably for the next Halo and Gears of War and these, and when they, talk about a new console and things like that. They just don't really have time in one showcase anymore unless they want it to be 5 hours long. And then everyone would complain that they're 5 hours long. It's what I was saying on social media and stuff is that Xbox is now becoming, starting to have the same problems as Nintendo, where Nintendo will have games queued up for years sometimes because they're waiting for the right moment to release the game where it gets the most exposure and the most sales. Well, now Xbox can basically do the same thing. They can push back games, which is has its own advantage because it means that a game like Fable could have come out this year, but it doesn't need to because they have other games coming. And now that studio just gets more time to finish that game properly. So this means that there's probably gonna be less pressure on devs to get games out faster. And it means that we're going to get a more consistent cadence of games. And it already feels like they're overloaded. And I suspect their studios still aren't even at full capacity, especially the studios they acquired through Activision Blizzard King. They're surely it's going to take another 3 or 4 years for them to get them into the groove. And I think it's strange to see a show like this in a bad way that was so good, that had good first party, that had good third party, that had hardware announcements, and try to be like, this was bad. I saw people rating it, even I think it was kind of funny, rated it beneath State of Play and Summer Game Fest. Summer Game Fest, outside of like Resident Evil 9, was the biggest steaming pile of crap I've ever seen. It was awful. It gets worse every single year. And PlayStation, I mean, it did show like one or two cool things, but almost everything else was forgettable. And I don't think that was the case with this show. If you only saw it as, a 6, 7, what out of 10, whatever, that's fine. If it didn't read to you, then that's fine. But I don't think you should rate these shows. And if everything was catered to you, I think you have to kind of look at these shows. At least if you're an influencer or a commentator, you should be looking at these shows as, for what they mean and what they presented. When I see, fairly large and well-known outlets and influencers and stuff, grading these shows on their like personal fifis, that's like weird to me because that's, not your role. Like your role isn't to just give your, how a thing felt to you specifically. It's to commentate onto what it means to the game industry and, gaming as a whole and to all gamers, not just your own personal thing. So, I maybe I wouldn't be arguing that if they felt different or if the reviews from other people I saw felt different, but I just, it kind of felt like people went into it knowing that they weren't going to let Xbox have another win, and that's fine, whatever. Moving on to Summer Game Fest 2025, Resident Evil 9 was revealed at the end. They actually teased it twice during the show, and I kind of hated that. It was very misleading and was kind of weird, but it was cool at the end. Apparently, Leon Kennedy from Resident Evil 2 and some other ones will be reprising as the protagonist and the daughter of an old character from another game. Seems like she's going to be playing a big part in it as well. It looked really cool. I'm sure it'll be great. It takes place in the bombed out, like the nuked Raccoon City. So that should be really interesting. I'll be curious to see more about that. For the love of all that's good, I hope it's a third person game. Please, no more first person Resident Evil games. I will not play them. Arc Raiders got a release date, October 30th, 2025. Super cool. Very excited. I'm sure they'll do a test or two before then. The reaction to this was so pathetic, because there were some like rumors it was gonna shadow drop during the show due to some Steam updates that happened. Literally, that studio did not hint or insinuate that at any moment in any way, shape, or form. People thinking it was gonna shadow drop was 1000% something they just made up, that they just speculated. And now there's a bunch of them who are furious. I've seen so many comments from people, saying it like ruined the show for them, that they don't even care about Arc Raiders anymore. It is so strange because Like there was no reason to believe that. I wasn't completely against that idea. The last test I played of that game felt like a finished game. But hey, they want to take 4 more months, go nuts. Polish that thing up, take all the data you got from the test or from further testing, and let's get this thing tight and let's see how great we can make that game. Because I think of all of the extraction games we've seen basically since Tarkov, I think it has the most potential for success. So we'll have to wait and see. There was a really neat stop motion game that they showed called Out of Words. I was just very impressed by it visually, because the idea, making a stop motion movie or show is insane because of the amount of time it takes. It reminds me, if you've ever watched Parks and Rec, where one of the characters there is having like a mental health breakdown, and someone comes over to his house after he's been missing for days, and they're like, "Hey, are you okay?" He's like, "Well, look at what I've done. I've been working on this for 2 weeks or something." And it's like 4 seconds of stop motion footage. And he has like a breakdown because he didn't realize it was so little time. Anyways, it looks like they've done all of the animations in this game all with stop motion, which is so neat and so insane to think about making a game like that. So, very excited to see that. And for me, that was it. It was awful, in my opinion. We had a bunch of Souls games that just all looked the same. Um, honestly, the Death Stranding 2 trailer was awful. It was just two people talking. We have no idea who they are, what they're talking about. There's some symbolism in it that means nothing to us because we haven't played the game. And then I saw people who had gone to Japan to play this game and who played like Blessing Adeoye Jr. at Kind of Funny, played the game for 30 hours. And when he saw this, I saw him talking about it. He had no idea what it was about. So he's played that game as long as most games take to beat. And this trailer meant nothing to him. I just that should have been a highlight, and it wasn't. A bunch of gotcha and weeb games. Sorry, Pizza Morg. It was so funny, his emphasis on small team games. At one point, Jeff Keighley said, "This game made by a solo developer and 9 of their best friends." No, that's a 10-person developer, like development studio. Like this, he talked about this small studio thing over and over and over again. And here's the thing. No offense to those teams. Those games are probably really neat. They're going to be great, I'm sure. But every time he said it, it was supposed to be like, and every time people say that, they're like, you won't believe this was made by a team of 10 people. And every time the game looks like a game made by 10 people. Like, it's fine. And Expedition 33 has set a weird bar, especially because it wasn't really made by 30 people. It was kind of led by 30 people with a bunch of contract developers. And the problem is now is that there's going to be such an obsession with these small team games. And the problem is that most of them aren't great. Like most of these small team games are like the first projects for these studios, the first projects for the developers themselves. And they're just not going to be great because they're still figuring out how to make games, right? And it was to me, it was just very cringe because he kept saying it as if it was like, "Oh, there's no way this was made by 10 people." And every game they showed just looked like that. Like, "Oh yeah, this was definitely made in Unreal Engine, mostly with stock assets, and they are putting their twist on it with this mechanic or whatever." Like, come on. They showed off Atomic Heart 2, kind of mixed on that. That first game was interesting. I played it a little bit. I found it to be really it was trying too hard to be like edgy, I guess. Not to mention the development studio, or at least some of the people there. There's some really weird political shit there with like them, potentially being extremely supportive, if not tacitly supportive of the Russian war against Ukraine, which if you're someone who cares about that, it's kind of a problem. We'll see. They also had some multiplayer game they showed. I don't know. That studio just feels like a vaporware studio to me, but I'm probably wrong. There was also, I can't remember off the top of my head, there was like the Mecha Salt or whatever it's called. There were games here that I swear I've seen for like 6 years in showcases. I'm probably exaggerating, but there were definitely games that we saw that we've seen at least 3 or 4 times in other showcases over the years. And he's just so, I don't know. Jeff Keighley shows are just kind of good for that. The Splitgate 2 had this big reveal, and the owner of the studio, the founder of it, came out holding this like weird bat looking thing, I assume from the game, wearing a hat that said "Make FPS Great Again" in the stupid MAGA style, and gave this like the hat was tacky, the bat was tacky. I could get over that. He's just doing the whole "hello fellow children" thing. My issue was that he gave this like half-hearted, soulless speech about how FPS games are all bad now, and how we need Titanfall 3, and how Call of Duty and Halo suck now. Or not, I'm putting my own spin on it. And it was so funny because he's like, we need someone to revolutionize FPSs, and he's wearing this stupid hat, and he's giving this really annoying speech, and then he struts off thinking he just did it. Cue the Imagine Dragons music that we've heard in 1,000 trailers, and they reveal that Splitgate 2, a arena PvP game, is adding a battle royale mode. Like literally something that would have been maybe a little interesting 10 years ago. So he gives this half impassioned speech about how, FPS games are tired, they're not innovating, they're doing nothing new. And then he gives us the most stereotypical expected FPS mode in their new game possible. It was hilarious. Afterwards, I looked into this guy a little bit. His dad was one of the co-founders of Intuit, which is this gigantic tax firm. And he also wrote software for a few other tax companies. And he's been a venture capitalist for 30 years. And he is the hold your horses, hold on to your seat. He is one of the investors into the studio that's making Splitgate, and almost certainly is like their primary investor. So this guy comes out, does this annoying speech wearing this stupid hat, and he's just literally like a Nepo baby, and who seems obsessed with Elon Musk. So, take from that what you will. I thought it was hilariously stupid. I thought this show was honestly terrible. It was another thing. It was 2 hours long, and it was like 15 minutes of interesting stuff, 45 minutes of like mundane whatever, and then an hour of straight up ads and games that clearly just paid to be there. And so my issue is that it was too long. It doesn't need to be, this does not need to be 2 hours. It had too many ads. I think at least half of the show was an ad, and there's just no pomp and circumstance. Like they had Mads Mikkelsen there for Death Stranding, and it was awful. And or no, he was there for 007. That's right. Which they showed, and it was fine. It looks kind of crappy. It's a 007 DLC or content or whatever for Hitman. They didn't show the 007 game too much. It looks okay. It just, man, this was just kind of bad, and it's getting worse every year. And it's so strange to me that I see a bunch of these talking heads saying the opposite, like talking about how, oh, Jeff is really finding his stride and all this stuff. And like, here's my take. Every time you talk about the ads, you'll have people, even like big people. I've seen people from like Giant Bomb and Kind of Funny, and all these people be like, well, it's expensive to do an event like this. And my response is why? Why is an event like this expensive? There were some shots of Jeff during this show where his back was to the crowd and the camera was at his face. And there were a lot of empty seats in this place. It's the YouTube Arena in the middle of LA. Okay. It doesn't need to be there. The show doesn't need to be 2 hours long. It doesn't need to be live, honestly. They could do so much more interesting stuff with these shows, I think, by having them not even be live. Pre-record these things, put in segments of developer interviews and stuff like that. The thing is that if you remember, even just a few years ago, we found out how much he's charging for these ads. There's this argument of like, well, these events are expensive. His profit margin on these events, I bet, is 50% or more. he makes so much money off of these events that I think it gives him zero incentive to make them shorter or to make them better. Because I don't think he cares. I think he's getting a payday and he gets his FaceTime with all these developers and all these industry people and all these stars sometimes. And he gets to be on camera, for 2 hours. And it's especially annoying because I don't even think he's that good of a representative for gamers. Like, he avoids at all costs talking about the layoffs. Like, he'll like give a tacit mention to it, but he avoids, talking about layoffs. The only time I've ever seen him stand up to anything was standing up to Konami when they screwed over Kojima, and that's because that's his best friend or whatever, right? But like, the show can be smaller and shorter, especially if most of the big announcements are going to like Xbox. I think there's a really good chance he just doesn't have the juice. A lot of these big, more exciting games would rather be at Xbox or maybe even PlayStation at some point, right? And they had some good. We'll talk about PlayStation next. But like, I don't think he has the juice like people think he like. He did the same thing he does every year. There's 35% more viewership on this year's show. That's such a BS stat. There's just more people. Who knows how they're collecting that info? Like, it's all just fluff, right? It's so he can sell more expensive ads next year is what it really is. Because, why not? Why wouldn't he? I just like my whole thing with, you talk about this and people always push back, especially pretty influential people. Well, it's expensive. He has to do that. If the show was 45 minutes of actual announcements that was pre-recorded, and even had like a lot of pomp and circumstance to it, put some money into it, do some big stuff, but it could be half of what it is, and then it would be a lot cheaper. Like, the problem is that everyone talks about how expensive it is, and I say it doesn't have to be. It's only that expensive because he makes it that expensive. Every choice he makes with Summer Game Fest and the Game Awards makes it more expensive. Like, he could just try to grow it from something smaller, right? Summer Game Fest, he just tried to make happen after E3 died, right? And even the Game Awards, like, that has built up a little more naturally, but not really. And I would argue it's gotten worse as well. So, like, if it's too expensive, then make it cheaper. Make it fit what it can handle. Make it sustainable. But he won't, because it is sustainable, because he's making plenty of money, even if it's a mediocre show. At least that's my speculation. I guess I don't know that. But I don't know. It's just frustrating, especially when you see a lot of the talking heads in the industry, even people I like, who will defend it. And I hate that because I think, this is my conspiracy theory, I think they're afraid to cross. I think they're afraid to cross Jeff. I think Jeff does have enough influence, has enough connections, that these people are afraid to cross him and they don't want to offend him and they don't want to get cut out because, he knows people, he knows the right people probably, where it probably would be unfortunate if you're trying to make it in this business like full time to not be on his side. So everyone sucks up to him, pays for the ticket, pays for the hilarious parking prices, goes to this venue in the middle of LA to see this mediocre half-ass show. I don't know. It's not going to get better. It's probably going to be worse next year. My plan next year is to stream it, but only put the show in the bottom, like in a real small in the bottom corner, and then play a game. And whenever there's actually something interesting, I'll show it on the full screen. As maybe kind of a passive aggressive dig on it that no one will care about. Moving over to PlayStation State of Play 2025 last week, we saw that they basically announced that Ghost of Yotai was getting its own showcase. So that's cool. I'm sure it's going to be a great game. People are super excited. They showed off a new fighting stick, a new wireless one that's actually PlayStation branded. I'm sure it's going to be great. I'm curious to how popular wireless sticks are for that. It claims it has like super low latency, and it probably does, but I bet it's not as low as a wired one. And even making this in general is interesting because it seems like it's kind of targeting the like casual fan, even though I bet it's going to be like $400 or $500. It's going to be expensive for show. But I think it's kind of strange because, and I don't know the fighting game world very well, so maybe I have no idea what I'm talking about. I have to imagine people who are like serious about fighting games have the fight stick that they prefer and have the brand that they like and have the one that they always get and that they'll get forever until they can't fix it or until there's a new one or something. I'm so curious to who this is for. I know the fighting genre is bigger than I probably think it is, but I don't know. I'm curious. This feels very gimmicky, but maybe that's just my bias. They showed a ton of multi-platform games. I don't really know what they're doing first party wise. I mean, they had some first party stuff. Obviously, Yotai. That's gonna be a big game this year. That's a big deal. Um, they had like some content for Astrobot, I guess. Um, I mean, and I've said it 100 times, and I'll say it again. This live service push that they did, where they've canceled multiple games, they've shut down studios, they've released a game and then shut it down in a week, and then they have a game like Concord coming out that doesn't look like it's going to be good. That live service push, I mean, there's been rumors that Sony Santa Monica was making a live service God of War game and that got canceled. We know Naughty Dog was doing a The Last of Us multiplayer live service game that got canceled. It seems like all of these studios basically had a bunch of time and resources wasted on this live service push, and they're still doing it. They have that what Paydays or whatever that show or whatever that game is called. That sounds like it's not going well. The studio director left, and the founder of the studio left. It just weird times. I'm just surprised we didn't find out what Gorilla's up to, what Sony Santa Monica's up to, that we didn't see anything new or really interesting about Naughty Dog's next project or the unannounced one that they've said that they're working on. Just weird. Just weird. I've said it enough times. I don't need to say it again. They did show some third-party games and some third-party exclusives. Pragmata looks interesting but weird. Silent Hill F looks terrifying and will be a really good multi-platform game that comes. The 007 game got its first reveal here from IO Interactive. Seems pretty neat. Another multi-platform. And then Metal Gear Solid Delta, which they showed some more from that, which I thought was interesting because most of the marketing on that game has actually been with Xbox. So for it not to show up in the Xbox show and to show up in PlayStation, Konami is spreading their dollars out, it seems, and that's probably pretty smart. Overall, the showcases were okay. I thought the Xbox one, definitely, I have some bias there, so take it for what it is. I thought it shined. I thought that was my favorite one. Summer Game Fest had some moments, and the PlayStation show had some moments, but I thought they were pretty rough overall. And now we move on. The Nintendo Switch 2 released, if you don't remember, because I barely do. It's so interesting. They released the same day as the PlayStation show, and it made sense, right? Like, but I think it made sense when people assumed that there would be some games announced for Switch 2, but there weren't, as far as I know. So right now we have the Switch 2 that came out. Overall, I would say the positive sentiment. It seems like it's got some quirks. It's got some issues. Stick drift is already an issue, apparently. Battery seems to be as bad as people thought it was. But overall, it feels, I've seen a lot of people say it feels more premium than the first one. That the screen looks really nice, even if it's not the same as the OLED. That it does seem like it plays games pretty well, especially in docked mode. But it's strange. I feel like the conversation, at least for maybe normies, I'm sure in the Nintendo community, everyone's still losing their mind. But I feel like the kind of backside of all these showcases, people are talking about the games that got revealed. They're talking, at least for a little bit, about the Xbox handheld. They're talking about everything but the Switch 2. And it's already setting records for how quickly it's selling. It'll be fine. I'm not saying it's like a failure or anything. But I think the fact that they released it when the most gaming news comes out all year was interesting, especially before. And then they have the issue of that the console is like, it's very iterative. It is basically, and seems to be, and I've even seen like Digital Foundry kind of speculate on this, that the chip is about 3 years old that it's using, that there's a really solid chance this was supposed to come out 3 years ago as a Switch Pro. And it would have been like a direct, like a mid-gen refresh instead of a Switch 2. which honestly probably would have been better because a bunch of these things they're doing that seem kind of yucky, for upgrades and stuff like that, they probably wouldn't have done if they would have released it. But the Switch One was selling so well 3 years ago, they just sat on it. That's why it seems like they have a lot of stock. They've probably been building that up for 3 years. Um, I really think that kind of makes sense, and I think that's led to it kind of almost being forgotten, at least in the day-to-day conversation. As well as it literally has one new game. Like the biggest conversation points around this new system are the new Mario Kart game, which will sell like 20 million copies and it'll be fine, right? And then like Cyberpunk, which like runs at relatively low resolution at like 40 FPS for like an hour. and but it's, I mean, it works and it looks pretty good. It does beat the Steam Deck from what I've seen, which isn't that big of a deal because the Steam Deck, it would have been competitive with the Switch 2 if it was the Switch Pro 3 years ago. But regardless, I think it's weird. Like the people I know who are into it are like, yeah, it's cool, but it's also not that exciting. It's just a new Switch, which is fine, and it's gonna sell well. It was interesting. Some analysts I saw were talking about how it's gonna break records for sales for sure. That's also because the market grows every year, and that's kind of just what happens as the market gets bigger than it was 8 years ago, right? Um, but also they only expect it to sell, in the next 5 or 8 years or something, like 90 million units, because it, at least so far, at least off the bat, from what we know, isn't really doing anything that big. And I personally have speculated from the tech that we've seen from it that's been detailed, it's going to have this like early window where it can play a bunch of these third party games that the Switch couldn't, obviously. It's going to, we'll probably even see some first parties take advantage of some of this power, and some of those games will look better. And especially the Switch original games or Wii U games that got brought up to the Switch will run extremely well for the most part. They'll, because they're from like 10 years ago. So I hope they do. But then I think in a year or two, we're going to start seeing third parties trying to put their games on the Switch too. And it's because it's around the power of a PS4, it's not going to be able to do that third party thing for very long. And they're going to have to go back to doing this thing of either heavily leaning on this custom DLSS it has, which can only do so much, or they're just going to have to go back to cloud games where you're going to have to stream if you want to play some of these third party games. I think that happens way sooner than people are willing to acknowledge. I think that happens like within 2 or 3 years. And it, I don't know. It doesn't seem like the people who love this thing care, and that's fine. I'll kind of leave that be. But yeah, I don't know. Switch 2, if you're enjoying it, that's super awesome. Let me know in my comments on YouTube. If not, maybe let me know as well. But I just think it's going to be kind of forgettable pretty quickly, at least until they have some big games get announced, which will probably be next year. This feels like years ago now, but earlier in the week, there was some other news. We had the Witcher 4 tech demo drama. I actually did a whole video on this. Long story short, Unreal Engine had a big showcase. They showed off a bunch of this Unreal Engine 5.6 stuff. It seems like it's actually going to make a lot of games run well on consoles, like modern consoles. And one of the demos they showed was a tech demo, not gameplay, from The Witcher 4. And it was being rendered live by a PS5, a base PS5. And that went out everywhere. And for the most part, it was mostly at least somewhat responsibly reported that it was a tech demo. CDPR even clarified later, like, yes, it's tech demo. That is not the game. It's just set in the game's universe. It's inspiration, right? But then we had some people, namely Jeff Keighley, on all three of his major platforms, his own Twitter, which has a ton of people, the Game Awards Twitter, and the Summer Game Fest Twitter, which was obviously a buzz because Summer Game Fest was coming up, where all three of those, he had three different tweets he put out saying it was gameplay. And it wasn't. That's a lie. And what's really annoying to me is I don't even blame CDPR for this. I'm extremely skeptical of CDPR because of what happened with Cyberpunk 2077. the way they advertised it in the lead up, the way that game today still isn't what they advertised, even though it's very good. And then how a bunch of their executives have tried to like gaslight us into thinking that CD or that Cyberpunk 2077 wasn't a complete crap show on PC, on modern consoles, and on the old consoles. Everyone always says, oh, yeah, the old console thing sucked, but it was a mess everywhere. And even today, if you play that game, I just finished beating it. I just beat it a month or two ago. I love that playthrough. I've come around on the game. I love Cyberpunk 2077. You just run down the street. I play on PC. I have a nice PC. You run down the street. There's constant car accidents just happening all the time. There's constant glitching happening in the game all the time. But if you're enjoying your playthrough, you kind of learn to ignore it. Like, that game is still a hot mess. And that makes me hesitant about anything they do forever, right? But this wasn't their fault. But you have people like Jeff Keighley, and I just talked about Summer Game Fest. You know, he has this platform. He has seemingly a lot of influencers and journalists and stuff kind of scared, or at least people who really look up to him, right? Or scared to go against him, however you see it. And he just lies. And those tweets are still up as far as I know. Like, he never took them down. He never said, oh, my bad, those are tech demos, my mistake. He just tweeted and ran because he knows it doesn't matter. So it was interesting. I'm sure it's going to be great. I'll be curious to see if these new updates and the new Unreal Engine 5 games that come out that take advantage of this newer UE5 tech will run better on current consoles. But you kind of have to assume the target moving forward is probably whatever comes next. But we'll have to wait and see. Black Myth Wukong is coming to Xbox. Wouldn't you believe it? On August 20th of 2025. Now, I don't want to surprise you or anything, but that is exactly to the day 1 year after it released on PS5 and PC. This is notable if you haven't paid attention because it didn't come out on Xbox on the release. And the studio head claimed that this was because they were having issues with the Series S. They couldn't optimize the game for the Series S. This game is well known as one of the most unoptimized piece of crap technical games ever. People really like the actual game itself, it seems like, at least for the most part, especially in the country that they made it. But that's a different discussion. But the studio head, you know, and a bunch of people, especially these like PlayStation influencers, oh, there's no deal. Why wouldn't they advertise that they have exclusivity? Whatever. Well, it's possibly because PlayStation does exclusionary deals and they don't advertise those because they would look bad. So why would they? And they've done that before, for sure. And we know that PlayStation helped pay for the production of this game, at least partially, right? And that's fine. Just say you did a deal. Like, why does it have to be secret? Now, the big pushback everyone has had, the PlayStation fans and Wukong fans and whatever, well, they've done every major announcement or showing of the game on August 20th. It's just the date that they do stuff. Sure, fine, whatever. You just can't convince me that there wasn't a 1 year deal in place where they weren't allowed to put it on Xbox for 1 year. And now this game's going to come out. It's not even going to sell that well on Xbox. Like, I forget where I saw it, so maybe it's not accurate. But at one point, I believe like it was something like 75 or 80% of their sales were in mainland China. And that's super cool. It's a bunch of people from a place that are proud that a studio from there did this thing. And it's a visual spectacle at the very least. I'm under the impression that like the actual gameplay is fine and that there's a bunch of stupid stuff in the open world. It's essentially like a boss rush where you just do a bunch of bosses in a row and there's some stuff in the middle, right? But I don't know. It's just so funny. And it was so funny seeing people like Colin Moriarty from Sacred Symbols, who's like the smartest guy in the room, he thinks, all the time, be like, well, a year ago when people were, you know, saying like, oh, this is, you know, what's going on with this exclusivity, and him, you know, a year ago was like, well, you know, why wouldn't they advertise they have exclusivity? Use your noggins. And a bunch of people were dunking on him after this announcement happened, and he, you know, reiterated this was obviously due to development issues. You know, kind of, you know, unable to say, like, admit, like, at the very least, this looks like there was something more to it than just that. But Maybe not. We'll never know. Like the truth will never come out. So everyone can feel like they're right, just as some of those people like it. One of the most exciting things I saw this week, and it had nothing to do with any of the showcases, is Owlcat, the developer, announced the Expanse Osiris Reborn. And if you read about this game and what they're saying about it and what their inspirations are and the way it's going to play and the features and everything, it's a Mass Effect game. They are making a Mass Effect game in the Expanse universe, which is hilarious because if you ever like look up like shows like Mass Effect, like if you're trying to see another property that's a lot like Mass Effect, the Expanse is the main one people talk about. It is seems heavily inspired by Mass Effect, or at least similar inspirations. And so it's going to have, you know, it's a cover shooter, it's a third person action RPG, it's going to have consequential choices, and it's going to have romances. So, and the footage they showed looks very early. I think it's pre-alpha from what it said, but it looked really nice. Very cool aesthetic, very cool cinematic trailer they showed with it. But the aesthetic of the actual gameplay they showed was really, really great. So super hyped for that. I kind of made a joke that we know more about the Expanse Osiris Reborn that was announced like a couple days ago. We learned more about that game in 24 hours than we know about Exodus, which got announced 2 years ago. And I have no idea when it's supposed to come out. And they didn't show up to any of the showcases this year. That game, man, we'll get into it more one day. Speaking of Mass Effect, we did get confirmation before all these showcases that the Amazon Prime series has a showrunner now. His name is Doug Young, and he was involved with Star Trek Beyond, as well as the where am I? I lost myself there. And the Mindhunter, which I haven't seen, but people universally loved. I personally like Star Trek Beyond a lot. I'm still pretty concerned because I think it's the producer of the show is someone who's made nothing but complete crap. So we'll, kind of keep our expectations tempered there, but I'm still excited. I think it looks cool. I just hope it's decent. I just personally wish that any Mass Effect show was just animated and they would just use the people from the game as the voices. But, a boy can keep dreaming. Tencent has acquired 15.75% of Arrowhead, the Helldivers 2 developer, for about $80 million. My initial take on this was like, man, Sony must have screwed them over for money. This money, I'm sure, will be used for development, but actually a BioWare developer chimed in and made me realize that this deal is almost 1,000% to allow them to sell in the Chinese market through Tencent as their publisher. Helldivers 2 sells in China, which is hilarious to me. If you have ever looked into what it takes for a Western game to be sold in China and the changes they have to make, it's the fact that Helldivers 2 is allowed to be sold there. I would kill to see what that game looks like there. Anyways, Sony got them there. They didn't have to use a Tencent to be able to sell there. So this time it makes sense that they're not going to be partnering with Sony for their next game. So they need a partner so they can sell in China. Tencent is that partner, and they gave them a big old chunk of their company for it. So hopefully it works out. Cyberpunk 2077 is getting another patch, 2.3, coming up. They're going to explain more about it soon. It seems like rumors are suggesting there may be more content than you would expect. This is not being developed by CDPR. CD Projekt Red is actually very transparent about how many devs are working on each project, and they have no one on Cyberpunk 2077 now. It's actually being done by Virtuous. They're like a co-dev that has worked on a ton of games. Specifically, they did Cyberpunk 2.2, the last update, and it seems like they've let them keep working on it. So I'll be excited to see what comes of that. Hopefully it's more time with Pan Am, because that alone would bring me back to the game, as hard as that is for me to admit. And the last couple stories here, X Defiant is finally done. It was never good. I played it all the way back to like pre-alpha. That game always sucked, and the people pushing it mostly seemed more angry at Call of Duty than they were excited for X Defiant. The studio head who that made it, he's a former Call of Duty dev, Activision guy, I think, is leaving the industry over it and blamed Ubisoft for not advertising the game enough, which was hilarious because a ton of people pushed back and they were like, man, you guys endlessly delayed this game, you never got it fixed, like it didn't work right, and it was completely unbalanced. Like, maybe Ubisoft didn't help, but it was just not a very good game, and I stand by that as well. I think X Defiant, which was obviously supposed to be a The Division PvP game, like first person shooter, that they co-opted into being this hero shooter instead. I'm I'm not glad it failed. I'm not surprised it did. I played that game at very early stages and it sucked from the start. At least that's my opinion. So if you liked it, I'm sorry, but it was bad and now it's gone. And then finally, Twitch is rolling out 1440p 60 FPS streaming. It requires a sign up by the streamers. I have signed up. We'll see if I ever get approved because it's being rolled out slowly. I actually haven't seen anyone actually doing it yet. My assumption is that they've bumped up the bit rate, the amount of data you can send as a streamer, because the problem with Twitch in general is that even the 1080p streaming, they really don't let you send enough data to even make that look very good. So with 1440p, I hope that they've upped that amount of data you can send by a ton, because they really didn't provide very good 1080p streams already. So we'll see. As for content updates, I'll be kind of quiet for the next week. And expect the next podcast to probably be released on a Saturday. It'll be a bit late, just like this one was. I've just got a lot of stuff going on right now. So nothing bad, just busy, and that's okay. When I kind of get back to normal, I'm hoping to get back on my Mass Effect streams. Obviously, the podcast will continue. I think, especially with the Expanse game, I feel like I can make a Mass Effect podcast. I think I want to talk about that. And they've been doing some hiring and stuff, so it might be worth talking there. Maybe doing a little speculation for N7 Day as well. And then any videos and stuff as things come up. I'm kind of in a holding pattern with games right now until my life calms down a bit. So we'll do that when it comes up, and the regular things will keep happening regularly. And that is where I'm going to wrap this one up. Thank you so much for listening to this episode. Subscribe to the show on your favorite podcast app, leave a review on Spotify or iTunes, and subscribe to the Bond Diesel YouTube channel to get all of my videos, including this podcast. Thank you to everyone who supports as a YouTube member and or Twitch subscriber. If you're interested in supporting this podcast and all of my other content, please check out the links in the show description. If you have a question or feedback, or comment on Spotify or YouTube, let me know in my Discord or hit me up on social media at Bond Diesel or at the Baunfire. That is all I have for this episode of the Baunfire Gaming Podcast. So until next time.